Welcome, everybody. Thank you again for joining me on this extremely special edition of the Lyme Boss podcast. I am Heather Gray, aka the Lyme Boss, and today I've got one of my largest mentors that I've been following the longest time. So I'm trying not to fangirl out. I'm actually starting to sweat a little bit. I'm getting a little nervous. This is not like me. What are you doing to me, Dr. Tom? Anywho, I've got Dr. Tom O'Brien, and I think the reason that this is so impactful for me is because I was diagnosed celiac, right? And like most doctors, they tell you, oh, just go gluten-free. And there's so much more to autoimmune issues than just going gluten-free. And he was one of the few people out there screaming that at the top of the roof. And so God bless him, because that's what really helped dial in my health, my kids' health, and the people that I work with. And so we're going to be talking about everything autoimmune, gut health, brain health. He's got a new book out that we'll talk about, but everybody give a big round welcome to Dr. Tom O'Brien, the gut. I saw you speak in Colorado Lions at the Quicksilver. It was like 2 weeks before the world shut down. Yes. And you did the heal your gut dance.
Oh, the gut dance.
The gut dance, which is still in my brain. And I even showed it to my husband, and he'll do the gut dance because every time I'm like, oh, Dr. Tom O'Brien, he'll do and I was like, yeah, him.
Yes, it's impactful, and so people remember silly stuff like that, and hopefully it gets past their resistance so that they'll clearly take a look at whatever the information is.
Absolutely.
And as you know, everything we talk about is just pure science. There are a few things that are my ideas, but most of it's just what the scientists are trying to tell us. And unfortunately, when you're a geek at Harvard, the best that you can muster up is, it was surprising that every researcher in the room noticed this effect. That's how they say, holy cow, Batman, look at this. So it's those types of animated messages that seem to have a really good impact. So I hope that our time here today, people will find a value, and they'll start chewing on and digesting some of this information that unfortunately is not really commonly out there yet. Needs to be, but it's not out there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so, I'd love for you to jump in, because I think the biggest, pretend my audience has never heard you, and I'm sure they have, because you're amazing. But let's pretend that they haven't, and let's drop the knowledge of, why I've heard you speak quite often on how wheat affects everybody. Like that right there is like a bomb, right? And get a little bit into that, and then we'll get into the brain stuff, and then go, talk about how your books, all tied together, like all the beautiful wisdom that you drop, Mr. Dr. Tom.
Sure. So the first thing that I thought of for the Lyme Boss and your tribe is that I'm sure it's common knowledge in your circle of educated people on this topic that when someone has Lyme disease, it's an immune system that hasn't been able to muster up enough strength to keep the virus in check. And, for whatever reason, because if you look at the science, large percentages of the population have blood indicators that they've got a problem with Lyme, but they're asymptomatic.
Right.
Why is it that you go over the line of tolerance and start developing whatever the symptoms are? And it's because your immune system can't keep this in check. And so it flourishes. Well, why can't the immune system keep it in check? Because it's so busy allocating its resources to everything else in your life that you're exposed to. And now people, well, I feel fine. That's not a problem at all. But there's some things that you don't feel bad when you're exposed to them, like wheat is a really good example. And it's actually the only food that causes leaky gut intestinal permeability in every human when they're exposed to it. And this comes from Harvard. Maureen Leonard, a very famous gastroenterologist at Harvard, she did a literature review, meaning she looked at over 60 studies on this topic about wheat and this leaky gut thing. And the summary was that gluten activates transient intestinal permeability, slang term leaky gut, in all humans who consume it. So if you're watching this and you're a human, your wife may not think you're human sometimes, but if you're human, this relates to you. And if you have that impression that, well, I don't feel bad when I eat wheat, then for every one person that has gut symptoms with wheat exposure, there are 8 people that don't. The ratio is 8 to 1.
Wow.
They have brain symptoms. Maybe it's depression and they're on antidepressants. They have joint symptoms. Maybe they're stiff in the morning. They've got to take Advil to get going. They've got skin symptoms. It's the daughter with acne or eczema or psoriasis. They've got muscle symptoms. They're just chronic fatigue. They just don't have their energy. But if you're looking to feel bad when you eat wheat in order for it to be, well, I better look into this, then you're going to miss it 7 out of 8 times. That's just the science. So that's like, oh, wait a minute. So what is it about wheat that causes this leaky gut thing? Well, first, what's leaky gut? Let's just go there first. Because leaky gut is considered the gateway. St. Louis is the gateway to the West, that big arch in St. Louis. That town developed the moniker of the gateway to the West back in the 1800s when people were going west. And so the gateway in the development of autoimmune diseases is leaky gut. Now, well, I don't have an autoimmune disease. Cardiovascular disease is autoimmune. Alzheimer's is autoimmune. Parkinson's is autoimmune. Brain fog is autoimmune. That when our body's not functioning well, it's usually the immune system being activated, trying to protect you from something that's contributing to the symptom pattern that you eventually develop. So what is this thing about leaky gut? Mrs. Patient, your digestive tract is a tube. It starts at the mouth, goes to the other end. It's about 20, 25 feet long. It's one big long tube. Think of a donut. If you could stretch a donut out, so it's one big long donut, and you look down the center of that donut, that's your digestive tract. So when you eat food, you swallow the food in the digestive tract, it's in the donut. It's not in the body yet. The vitamins and minerals and proteins have to go through the walls of the donut into the bloodstream so that we can, because your blood's the highway, it's just a highway. Lots of traffic on the highway, but it's just a highway. Everything's going in the same direction, but it's bumper cars in there. When I was a kid, we went to the circus and you get in these bumper cars and you smash them into each other. And that's where your bloodstream is. Everything's bouncing around in there all the time. They're all going in the same direction. Right? So when you swallow food, it's still in the digestive tract. So how does it get into the bloodstream? Really important concept. If you think of proteins like a pearl necklace, as an example, the acid in your stomach undoes the clasp of the pearl necklace. Now you have a string of pearls, and your digestive enzymes act like scissors to cut that pearl necklace and cut it again and cut again, snip, 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 until you have each pearl of the pearl necklace called an amino acid. Now they go through the walls into the bloodstream, and then they're off on the highway, and they're the building blocks for new muscle cells and new brain cells and all of that. But how do they get through the walls into the bloodstream? Mrs. Patient, your digestive tract, your tube, the donut, is lined with cheesecloth. And only really small molecules can get through the cheesecloth to get into the bloodstream. That's why when you take a bite of hamburger and you chew it 3 times and gulp it down, you're supposed to chew 10 to 20 times, but you chew 3 times, you got this glob of meat now in your gut. That can't go into your bloodstream. It's very, very toxic. If it went into your bloodstream like that, it's got to be broken down into each pearl of the pearl necklace. And when it gets broken down small enough, now those tiny little pearls go right through the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. That's called absorption. That's very cool. When you see how all this works, it's really very cool to see it. The problem is what this leaky gut is, and all it is tears in the cheesecloth. So now you got tears on the inside of your gut. Now bigger clumps of the hamburger or tomatoes or bananas, whatever it is, bigger clumps go through the tears in the cheesecloth into the bloodstream before they've been broken down small enough. They're supposed to go further down the track, being snipped apart, and then just slip right through. But because there's tears in the cheesecloth, now these larger molecules called macromolecules get into the bloodstream and they're off on the highway. Then your immune system, first your brain says, what the heck is that? Yo, general. And in your immune system, you've got Army, Air Force, Marine Corps generals sitting around with nothing to do. General, you now are General Beef. Take care of this macromolecule of beef. Now you make antibodies to beef, trying to protect you. And that's the chronic systemic inflammation that is at the core in the development of all chronic diseases. They all are years of this chronic inflammation, mostly because the gateway in the development of autoimmune diseases, leaky gut, mostly because people have leaky gut, tearing the cheesecloth, letting these bigger molecules get in to the bloodstream before they're small enough, before they're safe to get in. Then your immune system, trying to protect you, is fighting all of these macromolecules. And then if you pull at a chain, the chain always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, your other end. It's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, wherever your weak link is. And the inflammation of your immune system trying to protect you from this garbage that's in your bloodstream, the inflammation is the pull on the chain. So the inflammation is pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain. And the weak link in your chain, maybe it's your brain, and you get brain fog or depression or anxiety or schizophrenia. Maybe it's your skin and you get psoriasis or eczema or acne. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what system of the body you look at. This is the mechanism. And no one can argue with this because it's just pure science, but it's too simple for our practitioners who have been trained differently. They don't think about this big picture. But this is what they're teaching now at Harvard Medical School. This is very cool.
It's heartbreaking. I'm at a dinner with a bunch of other functional practitioners, right? Functional practitioners who I thought were on the same alignment. Everybody else at the table but me was eating a gluten meal happily. And I thought my head was going to explode. It's like, how on earth do we get across to our clients, our patients, right? When the practitioners themselves still haven't figured out. I'm like, how are you working with this sick subset of folks? And they know this info. I know a couple of them know this info, and they're still choosing to ignore it and eat wheat, and it makes my head explode.
You know, that's very true. And a good friend of mine was just down recently. We live in Costa Rica. And they were down here and they came to visit for a couple of days, and highly trained functional medicine practitioner teaches other practitioners how to apply functional medicine principles. And she absolutely gluten-free, dairy-free. But we got into a conversation because there was something that may have had some exposure to wheat, maybe. And her response was, well, you know, I know. We're talking about the test, and I was encouraging her to do the test herself because there's one test that head and shoulders above everything else.
Are you talking about the Zoomers?
Yes.
I love the Zoomers.
Yeah, they're great. They're just great. We now have tools that we've never had before that are very accurate. And her response was, well, if it came back positive, what would I do different? I'm already squeaky clean, gluten-free. And I just looked at her. Well, what that means is that you don't know what to do. It doesn't mean there's not stuff to do. It means you don't know how to investigate deeper why your immune system is doing this. So it could be this, or this. 6 different mechanisms. And she just, really? I said, yeah, you need to take my course. You know, because I've got an online certified gluten-free practitioner course that I'm very proud of. And but in any event, so it's exposure. Oh, here's where all this is going. Every human, every time they eat wheat, tears the cheesecloth. Every human, every time. Why does that happen? And our friend, Professor Alessio Fasano at Harvard, began publishing on this in 1997, and they've written hundreds of papers now. It's because inside the first part of your gut, right after the food comes out of the stomach, because in the stomach, there's lots of acid in there that's supposed to kill anything. You have the same body as your ancestors from thousands of years ago, the same kidneys, the same gallbladder, the same eyes, the same immune system. And our ancestors 5,000 years ago, before agriculture, their primary concern was to find something to eat, food. So they'd find something, the first thing they do is sniff it. Then they nibble at it, then they eat it. And if there was bad bugs in the food, it's the job of the acid in the stomach to kill anything and everything. It's kind of like a microwave. You know, I've never thought of that analogy before, but that's a pretty good analogy. I told my wife I want a microwave in our kitchen, and she's adamantly against it. But she's come across now to my way of thinking on this. No, microwaves are great because there's one thing you use a microwave for in the kitchen, and nothing else can do what a microwave does. And she asked me, well, what's that? It kills everything. And so you put the kitchen sponges that are on the sink in the kitchen in the microwave every couple of days for 1 minute. Kills any bacteria, kills any viruses. That's what you use a microwave for, nothing else, because it kills all your food. And now you're eating dead food. There's no life force, no enzymes anymore in there. So
you had me worried there a little bit where you were going with that, Dr.
I
Tom.
know.
I was like, am I going to have to shut this off?
Right. Am I going to have to edit that out? No. Everyone should have a microwave. Actually, I think I'll do an Instagram video on that. Everyone needs a microwave. And this is coming from a functional medicine practice.
You're going to have everybody go.
You're right. Exactly. Oh, that's a good one. I will do that. I'll do that today. But the problem, so hydrochloric acid is supposed to kill anything that gets into the food. But if it doesn't, and the food comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, and if it doesn't kill whatever it is, you have sentries standing guard just inside the first part of the small intestine. And I think of the soldiers at Buckingham Palace. You know, those guys with those big hats, they're standing there stiff as can be. They look dormant there, but don't mess with them. Don't mess with them. They're highly trained. They're like special forces. Yeah. And these sentries standing guard in the first part of the small intestine are quite dormant. They're called toll-like receptors, TLR, toll-like receptors. And there's 9 of them, but the one inside the first part of the small intestine is toll-like receptor 4. The reason we have these toll-like receptors in the first part of the small intestine is that if anything comes out of the stomach, a bug from the food you're eating, toll-like receptor 4 gets activated right away, within 5 minutes. And toll-like receptor 4, no, it gets activated right away, but you see the result within 5 minutes. And what's the result? First, it increases the production of a protein called zonulin. And you don't need to remember this, but zonulin opens up the space between the cells. We call that leaky gut, intestinal permeability. So wait a minute. So the sentry standing guard in the first part of the small intestine actually will create leaky gut? And the answer is yes. Why? Because if there's a threat that comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, the sentries standing guard say, that's a threat. I need toll-like receptor 4 to activate and make more zonulin. Why? Because when you open the space between the cells a little bit, water comes out of storage in the gut into the tube to wash out the bug. If it's a bug, it's a microorganism, it washes it out. It's kind of like if you've got mud on your driveway and you turn the garden hose on and you're trying to, wash it off and it won't come off of the driveway, you have to put your thumb over the opening of the hose to get a spray, and then you just wash the mud right off. That's the purpose of leaky gut. It's designed to save our lives. And those ancestors that did not have the ability or good function of leaky gut, they died and they did not reproduce. But those that had this safety mechanism, they lived, they survived, they reproduced, their children carry the same genes, so they've got the same toll-like receptors. So over thousands of years, humans have developed this great protective defense against bad bugs, and so that you don't get sick and die. That's its purpose. So the first thing toll-like receptor does is it creates leaky gut. The second thing it does is it activates NF-kappa B, the major amplifier of inflammation in the gut. So now you're getting lots of inflammation to kill the bacteria, to kill the worm, to kill the bug, whatever it is that the toll-like receptors saw coming out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. This is a very cool system.
I was just going to say, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it saved your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's life many times over, so that they reproduce and every generation has this ability. That's why Maureen Leonard, reading over 60 papers on this, said this occurs in all humans, because wheat is misinterpreted by toll-like receptors as a harmful component of a bug. So this is a life-saving mechanism that occurs in every human every time you eat wheat. Well, I feel fine when I eat pizza. We already talked about that. The ratio is 8-to-1. It doesn't matter how you feel. This is going on in every human. And this is a very common activator of systemic inflammation, pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain. And if your genetics are a little bit weaker in brain function, you get brain fog, or you get depression, or you get anxiety, because your brain hormones, called neurotransmitters, they're way out of balance because there's so much inflammation in your gut, or in your brain right now. There's so much inflammation. Well, it's actually in your gut. There's so much inflammation that you don't make the right balance of brain hormones, and the result is depression. Now you're on antidepressants, which can never fix the thing. Hopefully they help you function better. It's a good thing. Hopefully they'll help you, but you got to identify the trigger that's causing all this. So that's kind of the bigger picture about wheat, is that it activates inflammation, systemic inflammation, in every human when they're exposed to it. And then wherever your weak link is, and that's determined by your genetics and what's called antecedents, how you lived your life. You eat tuna fish 2-3 times a week, every week, you got mercury poisoning, most likely. You've accumulated a lot of mercury, which goes to the brain. And so your brain may be the symptoms that you get. But in any event, the antecedents and your genetics determine where the weak link is. But the mechanism is the same. That's so important to understand. It sounds too simple. Well, when you read the science, here it is, again and again and again and again. My first mentor used to say, the human body is simply intricate and intricately simple. You know, stop throwing gasoline on the fire. You want less inflammation, you want less diabetes, you want a stronger immune system, you want better brain function, stop throwing gasoline on the fire. Well, what do you mean? Well, an obvious one in every human is wheat. Now, I never say that everyone needs to give up wheat. I never, ever say that. If I did, I'd sound like a nutcase. But when you have a health problem that you don't have a handle on, it's not working the way you want it to, then you do the wheat Zoomer test to see, is my immune system fighting wheat? If it is, that's the bottom line. All right, that's it. You're done with wheat. There's no arguing, no discussion, no negotiation. Your body will take you to the grave if you keep eating wheat, because it's going to try and protect you, because the outside structure of wheat these poorly digested clumps of the pearl necklace that can't be broken down into each pearl. That's the problem with wheat. We can't break it down completely, so you get clumps of pearls. That clump of pearl, those amino acids look exactly like the outside surface of a bug. And so toll-like receptor 4 thinks every time wheat comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, it's a bug. And toll-like receptor 4 is designed to save your life. You can't stop it. And they're trying to get drugs to stop it. As of yet, there's nothing. That maybe someday there will be, but right now there's not. That your body is going to try to protect you and save you from what it considers a harmful component of a microorganism. That's what they're teaching at Harvard right now. It's so cool that this is in their course curriculums.
That is very cool and gives us some hope that, it's more than just a gluten-free diet sometimes, especially for those of us that are celiac, and for those, especially with the chronic health issues like Lyme disease, mold toxicity, autoimmune, like I said, it seriously makes my head explode. I worked with a client who came to me from another practitioner who was a gut specialist, worked with her for a year, couldn't get over some of these other issues in her gut that she had. And she was like, could it be Lyme? I'm like, yeah, it actually could. But when I started digging deeper, oh, you ran a Zoomer. Okay, well, let's look at that. Whoa, numbers are off the chart. What are you doing still eating wheat? And she absolutely refused to even hear anything I had to say about that. And it's heartbreaking to see something that could be so kind of simple, right? That could change somebody's life, but people are just so.
Unfortunately, yeah. And in that test, by the way, the wheat Zoomer is the most accurate test, I can't say on the planet because I've not been to China or Japan, but I've lectured in many, many countries, and I always look at the labs at the breaks. So when doctors go down to look at all the vendors and the labs that are there, I always check the labs out. There's nothing in the world that is comparable. This is a paradigm shift in testing. And so it's the wheat Zoomer. It's really a great test. And for those people that have positive test results for one of the clumps of the pearl necklace of poorly digested wheat called gluteomorphins or prodynorphins. These are components of wheat that actually activate the opiate receptors in our body. So they're feel-good moments when you activate the opiate receptor. That's what cocaine does, is it activates the opiate receptors. That's also what low-dose naltrexone helps to stabilize, is those opiate receptors. That's why it helps with pain and many autoimmune diseases, low-dose naltrexone. But what happens with wheat is the gluteomorphins and prodynorphins also activate those feel-good receptors. So if you have elevated antibodies to gluteomorphins or prodynorphins, you're going to have a problem giving up wheat. And those are the people who say, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Patient, it's really important that we get wheat out of your diet, but it's really likely that it's going to be a little more difficult for you. It's very likely. So I'm going to suggest you work with our nutritionist and you come up with a game plan. Give me 3 mornings a week of a gluten-free breakfast. Just three. And when you feel comfortable with that, might take a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, who cares? You're working with these recipes. Then go to 4 days a week. And when you go to 4 days a week, then include 1 lunch a week that's gluten-free. And when you're good with that, then go to every breakfast gluten-free and then do 2 or 3 lunches a week that are gluten-free. And now include 1 dinner that's gluten-free. In other words, we tier them up as they develop the lifestyle habits for wonderful recipes and wonderful meals that are gluten-free. Because if you try to pull their stimulant away from them, they are as defiant as can be. But if you give them a paradigm where our goal is completely gluten-free, and if it takes you 6 months, who cares? We're talking about the rest of your life here, so that doesn't put a blessing on these garbage that so many practitioners say to patients, well, it's okay to have a cheat day one day a week. No, it's not. There's months of damage from one treat day or low gluten diets. Well, a little bit is better than a lot. No, it's not. There's no science to that at all. The doctor's just trying to be nice. And I tell doctors all the time, stop being nice. Be kind. Kind means authenticity, meaning the accurate information with compassion. That's kindness. And we all should be kind. But you got to tell them the truth. And that is, Mrs. Patient, it may take you 6 months, but the goal is completely gluten-free.
You are so much nicer than I am. I actually might need to adopt this little bit longer. Well, most of the time when I'm working with folks, it's within like 3-month packages. And so typically I try to speed that process along. So that way they're getting some wins by the end of the 3 months. But if a client is truly addicted and have a hard time giving that up, I could see where I kind of have a tendency to be a little all or nothing, a little on the militant side, and which is because I know how well it's going to help you feel better. But I lose some people in the cracks for that. So thank you for.
That's the key. You look at your results. What % of your clients are compliant with your recommendation? And if it's not 98%, then well, I need to up my game a little bit in how I'm approaching this.
Right.
Whatever that means. And if they have gluteomorphins or prodynorphin antibodies, those are the people you have to be kind with.
Right.
And really give them a game plan so that they're enrolled in, I'm not going to make my life more stressful here, but I am going to head in this direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So let's dig a little deeper into how we can heal your brain. The topic of your new book, and one of my favorite topics is, everything with mental health in the world these days, all the school shootings, like it is, between the anxiety to the depression, like it's crazy. The rise of Alzheimer's, dementia, and people just thinking that it's a normal thing of aging, right? Like it's become this normalized thing, which is absolutely disgusting to me. And a lot of it is tied to what we're eating and the inflammation. And so can you dig a little deeper into that?
Yeah. Today, our interview is being done today. This is a Wednesday. And 2 days ago, I was at the Buck Institute of Human Aging in Novato, California, the go-to place in the world where the research is going on how we age and how do we identify the factors of aging. I mean, they're doing such great research. They actually are working with NASA on why, and they are the people doing this, on why astronauts age in space. And there are hundreds of studies that they're doing. But anyway, I was there interviewing 2 of the lead scientists on this exact topic. And we knew from Dr. Michael Gershon at Princeton, in 1999, he wrote the book, The Second Brain. And we've known from way back then, for every 1 message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. The ratio is 9-1. And we've known this now for over 20 years. And so what does that mean? It means that your gut, and specifically the microbiome, the environment, and what makes up the inside of your gut, all the bacteria and the viruses that are there, the bugs that are there, all of that. If I exercise too hard and the next day my arm is sore, we know it's lactic acid. The muscles made too much lactic acid. My body didn't flush it out, so I'm sore today from all of that. It's the exhaust of muscle cells when they're working. The bacteria has exhaust. You can call it the poop of the bacteria if you want, but it's just exhaust. And the exhaust of the bacteria is called the metabolites of the microbiome. That's the geek term for it. Just a minute. 36% of all of the small molecules in your bloodstream are the exhaust of the microbiome from your gut. 1/3 of everything in the blood are these tiny little metabolites from the bacteria and the viruses in your gut. They're in your bloodstream. Why? Because they're the messengers that activate genes throughout, genes, how do I say this? In some ways, if you have the breast cancer gene, it doesn't mean you're getting breast cancer. It means it's the weak link in your chain. And if you turn that gene on so it's really active, you got a problem. Or if you've got the Alzheimer's gene, ApoE4, it doesn't mean you're getting Alzheimer's. But if you pull on the chain too hard and too much inflammation, those markers of inflammation, they activate the ApoE4 gene, you got a problem. So it's not the gene that determines what happens to us. It's how that gene expresses itself. That's the big difference. And people don't know that. You know, our doctors don't quite get that. And you don't turn genes on and off. It's not how they work. Genes work on dimmer switches. And you can dim down the genes of inflammation in your breasts, the BRCA genes, or the genes of inflammation in your brain, the ApoE4 genes. You can turn down the dimmer switch and you can ramp up the genes of anti-inflammation. That we can do. And we know a lot of science about that. So the goal here is to dim down the genes of inflammation. There's about 1,200 genes of inflammation in the body. And you want to dim down the messaging that turns those genes on and turn up the genes of anti-inflammation. Well, how do you do that? 36% of all of the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut are the small molecules in your bloodstream. They're the ones that have the hands on the steering wheel of how your brain functions and how your heart functions and how your liver functions. They're controlling the steering wheel of where your body's going. And what makes the difference? The more bad guys you have in your gut, bad bacteria, the more those messages, the metabolites in your bloodstream, are messages of inflammation, activating the genes of inflammation. So that's why Professor Alessio Fasano, once again at Harvard, this guy's professor of medicine, Harvard Medical School, professor of nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, the dean of the Celiac Research Center at Harvard, the dean of the mucosal immunology at Harvard, that's the lining of your brain, the lining of your gut, the lining of your lungs, and the chief of pediatric gastroenterology at Harvard, Mass General. 5 titles. Any one title is a lifelong goal of people at the top of their game. He's got 5. And he wrote he's always so careful about what he says, so he's not misquoted. But he wrote a paper 2 years ago. The title of the paper says it all. All disease begins in the, quote, leaky gut. The role of zonulin, that's that protein that opens up the space between the cells, the role of zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. So are you starting to put this together now of what the scientists tell us? That when you get leaky gut, tears in the cheesecloth, these big molecules of whatever you eat can get through into the bloodstream, and your immune system, trying to protect you, fights these molecules. So you do a 90 food panel to see what you're sensitive to. It comes back 20, 25 foods. And you say, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, of course it is. Your immune system's trying to protect you. You got tears in the cheesecloth. You got a leaky gut. Heal the leaky gut, check again in 6 months, and now you're sensitive to 2 foods, maybe 3. Those are the ones you stay away from forever. All disease begins in the leaky gut. And wheat activates leaky gut in every human that eats it. And there's no other food that does that. That's why it's so important that people be tested properly. Now, the tests that your doctors usually do are 25 years old. They're helpful tests, but they only look at 1 or 2 markers. Well, the wheat zoomer looks at 26 so that you don't miss anything. Much apples and oranges in terms of the test. One more concept here, because you are the Lyme boss. So, okay, now you had said that my immune system must be weakened to allow Lyme disease to manifest. The immune system couldn't handle it anymore. Why is my immune system weakened? Because it's fighting all the foods that you're eating. And you got so many bad guys in your gut tearing the cheesecloth, allowing these macromolecules to get through. And you got so much inflammation in your gut, and the messages are inflammation, inflammation. Turning on your genes of inflammation, doesn't matter if it's breast cancer or Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease or skin problems or hypothyroid disease, it doesn't matter. This is the mechanism that should be the first thing we always check to see what is my immune system saying right now about wheat, and what is my immune system saying about the leaky gut? Because the wheat Zoomer test also looks for leaky gut. So you get them both in that 1-2. Every patient that comes to me, and I do maybe one patient every 2 weeks now. It's only online. And I only they've got to get through my staff. They have to have been to many doctors and no one's been able to help, or they're stuck somewhere. And then I say, all right, I'll see that person. And then we do a Zoom call, and every single person, I want the wheat Zoomer and the neural Zoomer plus, because I want to see how much inflammation is in their brain right now, because that's really the epidemic that no one's talking about. Blue Cross Blue Shield published in March of 2020, and they said, we've got a problem here. In 4 years, from 2013 to 2017, in that 4-year period, there was a 407% increase in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's in 30 to 44-year-olds. 407% in 4 years. We've got a huge problem that people, their brains are inflamed so much younger in life now. And it's at the point, everybody's joking, oh, I'm getting old. I don't remember the way I used to. How old are you? I was 28. No, that's what happened. There's a 407% increase in Alzheimer's in 30 to 44-year-olds in 4 years, not in 40 years, in 4 years. And Blue Cross Blue Shield said, holy cow, this is not good. This is not good. And it's because of this tears in the cheesecloth, macromolecules getting in, activating genes of inflammation wherever the weak link is in your chain, and that's how it's going to manifest. This is rocket science healthcare, and I just use analogies that are really simple, but this is exactly what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School right now.
I love it. I'm remembering why I love you so much. I love your passion, and I love how you break it down into these simple, like a lot of these analogies I've heard from you before because I've been listening to you for a long time. But like the pearl necklace one, that's a new one. So there was a couple new ones that I heard in there. So I was like, bravo, keeping it fresh.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. It's heartbreaking. Like I said, how we've normalized a lot of these health conditions and these brain issues. And there's those of us that are standing there going, no, that's not the end of the world. We can reverse this, and you can have your brain and your body working, much longer in life. So, wow, though, 407.
One last thing, if I may. I don't think I really connected why Lyme disease comes with all of this. Your immune system is just beat up. It's tired. It can't handle it anymore. It's been fighting these foods and other exposure since you were born, right? And people are being born a little bit weaker or less resilience now because of generations of toxic chemicals accumulating in bodies. So your immune system, every single person who's been diagnosed with Lyme disease, that's real, and you want to learn, how do I deal with the Lyme? But also, how do I rebuild my system? How do I build a strong immune system again? The first thing, the most critical thing you can do, in my opinion, this is my opinion, is stop throwing gasoline on the fire.
Amen.
Reduce the inflammation in your body. Well, how do you do that? You rebuild the good guys in your gut, so there's less inflammation in your gut. You heal the leaky gut, and there's good science behind how to do that. But that's where you start when you're dealing with Lyme. Oh, my gut's fine. I don't have any gut symptoms. Well, you don't have any symptoms, but you've got a terribly functioning gut right now. Let's just do a couple tests to identify how bad it is.
It's heartbreaking. All they want to do is focus on treatment. And even these Lyme literate doctors, that's all they want to do is focus on treatment. What did you do to treat? What did you do to treat? And I have to keep saying, no. You got to go back to the beginning. Why is it that you got sick to begin with? It wasn't just because you got bit by a tick and you got sick. Right. Because then everybody would have Lyme disease, because the way that it's transmitted, and we've been, coexisting with this bacteria for thousands of years, and our body used to know how to keep it in check. Yes. And so, thank you for again, bringing that piece around into it, because I think if that's the one thing that I think Lyme clients especially need to hear the most, is that they just can't focus on treatment. They got to go back to why their immune system dysfunctioned to begin with, which is usually tied to food.
Right, exactly right. You've got to rebuild the microbiome. Fasano's paper, all disease begins in the leaky gut. Well, that doesn't, all disease. And this guy's got 5 titles at Harvard as the boss in different departments at Harvard. All disease begins in the leaky gut.
Unreal. Awesome. So, yeah, go tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, I'm writing a new book now, but my talks this year are mostly centered around. This is a little more advanced concept if people are just being exposed to the idea that wheat can be bad for you. No. Wheat is bad for you. Not can be, it is. But you need to do the test to confirm that your immune system is allocating its precious resources to dealing with this food that you don't feel bad when you eat. So you need to get that test done first. And then people realize, okay, I guess I have to do a gluten-free diet. Well, what kind of pizza can I have that's gluten-free? And so most every doctor is directing people into a gluten-free diet, substituting the foods they were eating with gluten-free foods. And you can't do that. The talks that I'm doing this year, actually start next month in Europe, the title is The Enigma of the Gluten-Free Diet, Reduced Symptomatology and Increased Mortality. It's like, what? What did you just say? Increased mortality? You mean more people die in a gluten-free diet? And the answer is yes. Yes, that's true. And there's many studies on this, but gastroenterologists ignore it because they don't know what to do. And it's obvious you have to put celiacs on a gluten-free diet, or people with a gluten-related disorder in a gluten-free diet. Yeah, they die early, but they feel better. They feel better now. And that's all that they can do because they don't have the big picture. One of the problems, there's a few problems, but one problem is that the goal here, as Fasano told us, all disease begins in the leaky gut. So you have to build a healthy gut. You have to build a healthy microbiome, critically important, because the good guys in the microbiome, the good bacteria, their exhaust, the metabolites, are messengers that get in the bloodstream to your brain, to your heart, to your lungs, to your liver, and tell them, calm down, everything's great, just relax, build more of the happy hormones. That's the messages that come from the good guys in our gut. But when you have more bad guys in the gut, and the geek term is dysbiosis, it means your gut's out of balance, too many bad guys, not enough good guys. When you have dysbiosis, the messages are activating the genes of inflammation, like ApoE4 for Alzheimer's, or BRCA2 or BRCA1 for breast cancer, and so many other receptors of inflammation. You're turning the genes on to protect you, which is why you turn on these genes of inflammations, because your body thinks it's under attack, and so it has to deal with the attack. So you want to build the diversity of the microbiome, a healthy, diverse microbiome. And the first thing you have to remember in doing that is that it's the food that you eat that feeds the good guys in your gut. Food also will feed the bad guys, depending on what food you eat. And 80%, one study 78%, the other study 81%. So about 80% of the food for the good guys in the gut that are called prebiotics, that's the name of the category of foods, 80% of the prebiotics in the Western diet come from wheat. Not everything in wheat is bad for you. There's just more bad guys than good guys. So everyone's grown up eating wheat to feed the good guys, while at the same time you're getting more inflammation in the gut and leaky gut and all that. But the good bacteria in our gut depend on wheat to be fed by, to grow and prosper and have more of the good bacteria. When you go on a gluten-free diet, And if you do it the way almost everyone does a gluten-free diet, which is to substitute gluten-free crap, excuse me, but substituting these white pasty things that have no prebiotic value whatsoever, absolutely none. But you've stopped wheat. So now your swelling goes down, your belt comes a notch or two notches tighter within a month. You mean you're losing weight, you feel great, your energy's up, your child's seizures are gone, your skin's clearing up. It doesn't matter. You get reduced symptomatology when you go on a gluten-free diet if you had crossed the line of tolerance and your immune system is fighting wheat. So you calm down the immediate inflammation that was going on from the gluten, but now you're eating these gluten-free products that have no food value for the good guys in your gut, and the good guys start dying off of starvation. And the gluten-free products, whether it's pizza dough or bread or cookies, the gluten-free products, it's just white paste, feed the bad guys. So now you get slowly over the months, good guys go down, bad guys go up. Now the exhaust, the metabolites of this new microbiome, the messengers get into the bloodstream, activating more genes of inflammation. Now, so that's the patient. They come to you and they've got really bad skin, psoriasis. Let's say it's psoriasis, or let's just say psoriasis. You identify they have a problem with wheat. You put them on a gluten-free diet, and in 2 months, their psoriasis is in remission. It's gone. It's gone in 2 months. You are a hero. They think you're great. 10 months later or a year later, you hear that person died of a heart attack. And you say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh, that's too bad. And they were so happy. They were doing so much better. But you don't realize that you put somebody on a gluten-free diet, they have an 86% increased risk of a heart attack within the first year on a gluten-free diet. 86%. And a 3.87-fold, that's almost 400% increased risk of dying in the first year from a cancer on a gluten-free diet. You read the studies on this and you go, what? What? And there are many studies on this now, many, coming from our most prestigious research centers all over the world. And you don't realize until you understand the mechanisms of what's happened here. So what does all that mean? It means when you go on a gluten-free diet, you have to replace the prebiotics in the diet. That's one of the things. There's a bunch of things you have to do it correctly. Gluten-free diet is great for you if your immune system is fighting wheat. You just have to know how to do it correctly. That's the message.
Well, absolutely. And that was one of the biggest goalposts. I put out I talk about you a lot in my cooking series because I love how you simply put it on your plate. You're like, I have a carby, starchy vegetable, right? I have a green vegetable and I have a piece of protein. And that is how my plate is made up. And that is how I teach people as well, because a lot of folks are still, oh, well, isn't that starchy stuff? Isn't that carbs? Isn't that bad carbs? I'm like, no, that's actually the good stuff that's going to help feed the good guys in your gut. They're going to help, keep everything going properly. So
let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
A paper came out of Italy last year. They looked at 116 different gluten-free foods, and from 9 countries, and they checked the glycemic index of the food, meaning how much sugar does your body think is in this food? So when you eat this food, here's the amount of insulin you're going to make because it thinks, for example, some people have heard a slice of whole wheat bread has a higher glycemic index than a Snickers bar. You eat a slice of whole wheat bread and your body thinks you ate more sugar than a Snickers bar.
Wow.
It's like, what? Just look at the science. So 116 different foods, 9 of them were low glycemic index. Over 100 of them were high glycemic index, meaning they're going to throw your blood sugar way out of balance. And then you gain more weight over time. You've got more blood sugar problems. You're pre-diabetic. And eventually, if this continues, you develop diabetes. That's another enigma. of the gluten-free diet. You eat gluten-free products and your blood sugar goes haywire on you.
I was just taking a note.
Good. That's a sign of a good clinician. So wait a minute, I need to write that down to learn more about that.
Oh, like I said, I've been parroting you for years, so I love it. I lost that train of thought though. Where was I going? It's probably
It'll come back. The gluten-free foods, 116 gluten-free foods, over 100 of them were high glycemic index. Now, listen, I'm half Italian. I'm going to eat gluten-free pasta once in a while, but there's things you do to protect yourself. You learn how to do it in a way that you don't cause more stress pulling on the chain of your blood sugar regulation.
Gotcha. And what are a few of those?
Digestive enzymes. That's the first and most critical one, is that the inadvertent exposures to wheat that occur with gluten-free foods, you're contaminated most every day or every 2 days on a gluten-free diet if you're eating gluten-free products, that there's inadvertent exposures to wheat. The manufacturer didn't put wheat in there or any traces of wheat, but there's traces of wheat in there. Well, how did it get there? Well, the trucks that hauled the oats from the fields to the manufacturing facility hauled wheat last week, and they don't clean the trucks. Or the manufacturing facility is milling and processing wheat on another assembly line. It's in the air and it comes down over onto the oats. Most oats, if they're not certified gluten-free, are contaminated. That's one example. Quinoa. One study on 15 different types of quinoa found 4 of them had toxic celiac peptides, 4 out of the 15. And it wasn't contamination. It's in the quinoa. Well, how can that be? Quinoa, it grows on the high plains in Peru. That's where quinoa came from. No, it grows on the plains in the US. Well, how did they get the quinoa from the high plains at 8,000 feet in Peru to grow on the plains in the US? They're hybrids. They're genetically modified, and they use grasses from the Midwest in there. So some of the proteins are actually toxic to people with celiac or gluten sensitivity. So you need the enzymes. And then, okay, well, let's talk about the enzymes. Well, the problem with digestive enzymes for wheat is that most of them take 3 to 6 hours to work. Because they don't work in an acid environment. They'll work in the large intestine, and they'll protect your large intestine, but they will not work to protect activating toll-like receptor in the first part of the small intestine. They don't work. So I actually developed these enzymes a number of years ago that work within 60 minutes. So nothing comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, because that's where you activate the toll-like receptor standing guard. And then here comes the leaky gut, here comes the inflammation. That's all there to save your life. And so you can't have anything coming out of the stomach. So you take these digestive enzymes, there's 2 of them. One's called Wheat Rescue, and the other one's E3 Advanced. And you take them before you start eating. Normally, when you take digestive enzymes, you take them in the middle of a meal. Why? So that they're sitting inside the middle of that glob of food in your stomach, and they're digesting from the inside coming out, and your own enzymes coming from the outside digest from the outside coming in. So you get much better digestion, but not with these. With these, you take them before you start eating, so nothing gets out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine. Now, if I'm eating a plate of pasta, I'm going to take some in the middle of the meal also. So I'll take them at the beginning of a meal, and I'll take them in the middle of a meal.
That's awesome. I love Wheat Rescue. I don't eat out hardly at all anymore, just because I know all the cross-contamination, plus all the inflammatory seed oils that majority of restaurants are using. That's a whole nother conversation, but a conversation you need to know if you want to keep your brain, but I digress. But Wheat Rescue's been huge for when I do, once in a blue moon, go out to eat. I can feel a little safer that I'm not getting knocked out by it. So we are coming towards the end here. I just can't thank you enough. And I'm so glad I was actually able to regain my composure and act like a professional, from the fangirl that I started off with, like sweating. That was crazy. I don't know what that was, but I'm embarrassed and it's okay. So what is the name of your new book and where can folks find it? I know I know your people sent me some links that I'll put in the show notes, but what is the name?
Oh, thank you. The book is called You Can Fix Your Brain. And the subtitle is Just 1 Hour a Week to the Best Memory, Productivity, and Sleep You've Ever Had. And that's actually the secret to success in healthcare, is that people get overwhelmed by all the things that they're supposed to do. And they throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just overwhelming. You can't do anything. But if you allocate 1 hour a week to just learn a little bit more, 1 hour a week, then what happens? So 1 week, and because there's 36 different to-dos in the book to protect your brain. For example, when you apply nail polish, the phthalates, chemicals used to mold plastic, the phthalates in the nail polish are in your bloodstream 4 to 5 minutes. And now there's no evidence that that amount of phthalates is toxic to humans. It's really a tiny amount, but it's there and it accumulates in your body over the years. It accumulates. And so I gave you a list of 3 different organic nail polish companies online. So when you learn that you store food in plastic containers in your refrigerator, the next day that food has phthalates in it.
Right.
Because they leach out of the plastic container. So I gave you 3 links for plastic containers or for glass containers. And so it's mileskimball.com and Amazon, and I don't remember the third one. But you go to this, oh, those are okay. Oh, I like those. And you order 3 round ones, 2 square ones, 1 for the pie. You pay with your credit card. You hit send, you're done. It took an hour, right. But you're done for the week. You did 1 action step, and never again will you poison your family with small amounts of phthalates because of leftover food stored in plastic containers.
Absolutely.
And then next week you deal with the nail polish one. And then next week you get the handout on plants, because you learn that plants absorb over 70% of the toxins in the air, and 2 6-inch houseplants in a 10 by 10 room absorbs over 70% of the toxins in the air within 24 hours. And those studies come from NASA. Wow. Because the astronauts were going loopy in space and they couldn't figure out why. And they never talk about it to the news, but why did he respond like that? Well, there's something wrong. We need to evaluate him when he comes back down here. And what they found was that it was the air. The air was toxic because of all the plastic inside the space shuttles and all that.
No, gosh.
Emitting a little bit, like if you have plastic blinds on your windows, they're emitting phthalates into the air 24/7. Well, my air is fine. It doesn't smell bad. Really? You ever see the sunlight coming through the window and you see the little dust in the air and stuff? That's what you're breathing, is all of that. And it's the formaldehyde from the bedroom furniture. If it's not solid wood, all pressboard is soaked in formaldehyde. And the kitchen cabinets and the bathroom cabinets, if they're not solid wood. And you're breathing all of that all day, every day. And so you learn about air filtration systems and how important they are, and about plants in your rooms and how important they are. But all of these things, when you first read them, it's overwhelming, just completely overwhelming.
Right.
But if you allocate 1 hour a week, 1 hour a week, in 6 months, you've got this. And you've changed your life. And you go to church and you see someone you haven't seen in a while. Say, wow, you look great. What happened to you? What are you doing? You look so great. Well, I actually am reducing my exposure to phthalates because I have glass containers and I've got houseplants. And they look at you like you're a nutcase. Like, what? Right? Because they've never heard any of this. But the message is 1 hour a week. Be kind to yourself. Authenticity with compassion. Understand that you can't do it all at once. But you're on point, you're on purpose, and you are moving your family in that direction of less inflammatory triggers and building a healthy gut microbiome, and you will see the results.
Absolutely. Amen. Oh my gosh. Thank you again so much for joining us. And all of you folks, if you even learned one, and I know you've got at least 5 little nuggets you picked up today. If not, you weren't listening, you weren't paying attention. But please make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, right? Because that's how this information gets out. That's how people's lives get changed, get saved, and we get off this freaking crazy train that we've got going on in the world today with a 407% increase of Alzheimer's and dementia in 30 to 40-year-olds. Like that's disgusting. That's deplorable, and it doesn't need to happen anymore. So please like, share, subscribe. Make sure to get a copy of his book. Check out the links in my show notes, and make sure to have a healthy day.